Hello everyone. In today's video, we are going to talk about HACCP or Haccp. The full form of HACCP is Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points. So let's understand what actually Haccp is. Haccp is basically a statement of preventive system of controls which is based on the hazard analysis and critical control point. So what is this hazard analysis and critical control point? So hazard analysis, it basically involves, as the name suggests, the identification and the analysis of the product, which may or may not have any issue with it or any kind of source of pathogen with it, and it might be consumed by a special population such as infants or elderly. Once these ingredients are identified, the various critical control points are identified, and this critical control points involves identification of those points whose control is very necessary during the processing, because if any kind of problem occurs, then it could lead to an unacceptable risk to the consumers. Haccp is a process control system designed to identify and prevent the microbiological and other hazards in food production. It might be chemical hazard, biological hazard, or physical hazard. It includes a number of steps which are designed in order to prevent the problems before they occur and to correct deviations as soon as they are detected. So the main basic advantage of implementation of Haccp is it detects the problem, and it and the problem is identified before they are occurring, and problems are they are solved by taking corrective measures as they are detected. So such preventive control systems with documentation and verification are widely recognized by the scientific authorities and the international organization, as it is considered as one of the most effective approach for production of safe foods. So HACCP is a tool which is used for the prevention of food safety hazards. While extremely important, if HACCP is applied with along with other practices such as good manufacturing practices, sanitation standard operating procedures, and personal hygiene program, then this would lead to a huge success. HACCP was introduced as a system to control safety as the product is manufactured rather than trying to detect the problem once the finished product is obtained. Okay, so this is an important point. So HACCP is a plan, or we can say it is a food safety measure, uh, which involves the number of steps in order to control the safety of the product during the manufacturing process. Usually, the quality assurance or quality teams they detect or they find the problems in the product once the product has been manufactured in the finished products. But HACCP, it helps in controlling the safety as the product is being manufactured rather than trying to detect the problems once they have been manufactured or once the finished product is obtained. So this would help in minimizing the wastage as well as detecting the problems and curing it during the time of processing only, and not when they are being manufactured and processed into final finished products. This new system is based on assessing the inherent hazards or risk in a particular product or process and designing a system to control them. Specific points where the hazards can be controlled in the process are identified. The HACCP system has been successfully applied in the food industry. The system fits in well with modern quality and management techniques. It is compatible with ISO 9000, that is quality assurance system. And in this environment, manufacturers are assured of receiving quality products matching their specifications. So there are 7 discrete activities that are necessary to establish, implement, and maintain a HACCP plan, and these are referred to as 7 principles in the Codex guideline. So what are these 7 principles? Let us have a look. The first principle is conduct a hazard analysis. So identify the hazard and assess the risk which are associated with them at each step in the commodity system. So the first and foremost step is to identify the hazard and assess the risk which are associated with them at each step And next is describing possible control measures. Okay, so first is identification of the hazard, and then what are the risks associated with it, and then what are the possible control measures. Hazards, maybe it can be of biological, chemical, or physical, and they are the conditions which may pose unacceptable health risk to the consumers. So a flow diagram of the complete process is important in conducting the hazard analysis, and the significant hazard associated with each specific step of the manufacturing process must be listed, and preventive measures to control the hazards should also be listed. So the first principle is conducting the hazard analysis, which would involve identifying the hazard, assessing the risk associated, and describing the possible control measures. Next principle is determining the critical control point. A critical control point is a step at which the control can be applied in order to prevent or eliminate the food safety hazard or to reduce it to an acceptable level. It is a point, step, or procedure in a food process at which control can be applied, and as a result, food safety hazard could be prevented. A food safety hazard could be anything. It could be a biological hazard, chemical hazard, or physical hazard, and it can cause serious damage to the human population. So next is second principle was determining the critical control point. And what are these Haccps? These are the points or at which a control can be applied in order to prevent a particular food safety hazard or to reduce it to an acceptable level. The third principle is establishing critical limit. Each control measure associated with a particular critical control point, it must have associated critical limit which separates the acceptable from the unacceptable control parameters. A critical limit means maximum or minimum value to which a hazard must be controlled at a CCP to prevent or eliminate or reduce the hazard to the acceptable level. Okay. So the second principle was to identify the CCPs, and next the third one is to establish critical limit, that up to what limit it should be minimized so as to become acceptable. Next principle is establish a monitoring system. Monitoring is the schedule, measurement, or observation at a CCP to assess whether the step is under control within the critical limit specified in the principle 3. Okay, so next, this principle involves establishing the monitoring system in order to identify that a particular CCP is under control, that is within the set critical limit, so as to make it within the acceptable limit. Okay, next is monitoring is a planned text sequence of measurement or observation in order to ensure that the product or process is within control, as said in the statement above. It allows processors to assess trends before a loss of control occurs. Adjustments can be made while continuing the process. So this principle, it allows the processors to assess the trends before a particular loss occurs, and adjustments could be made while the process is continuing in order to prevent the loss. The monitoring interval must be adequate to ensure reliable control of the process. Next is establish a procedure for corrective action when monitoring at a CCP indicates a deviation from an established critical limit. So then the fifth step is to the fifth step involves there these are the actions to be taken when monitoring indicates a deviation from established critical limit. So once the critical limit has been identified and once it has been monitored, so if it is observed that there is a deviation from established critical limits, so these are the actions to be taken. The final rule requires has a plan to identify the corrective action to be taken if a critical limit is not met. Corrective actions are intended to ensure that no product injurious to health or otherwise adulterated as a result of the deviation enters commerce. Haccp is intended to prevent product or process deviation. However, should loss of control occurs, there must be definite steps in place for disposition of the product and for correction of the process. This must be pre-planned and written. For instance, a cooking steps must result in a product center temperature between 165 Fahrenheit to 175 Fahrenheit, and if the temperature is 160 Fahrenheit, the corrective action could require a second pass through the cooking steps with an increase in the temperature of the cooker. Okay, so let's understand what this principle fifth is. So once we have identified the CCP and once you know what is the critical limit the within which we should have the product, and if it is next step is while monitoring we identify that the product is deviating from the established critical limit, then we would require a HACCP plan to identify the corrective action, okay, which should be taken if a critical limit is not being met. And these corrective actions are intended to make sure that no product injurious to health or adulterated as a result of the deviation enters the market. So the HACCP is intended to prevent product or process deviations. Loss of control occur, then there must be particular steps which should be taken for the correction of the process. Like, for example, it is given that if a product's center temperature should be between 165 to 175 degree Fahrenheit, and if the temperature is 160 degree Fahrenheit, then the corrective action could be there should be a second pass through the cooking step, which would increase the temperature of the cooker. So this is how the hazard plan works, and all these are pre-planned and written, that what are the possibilities which could occur and what are the corrective actions which should be taken. Next is establish procedures for verification to confirm the effectiveness of the hazard plan. Such procedures include auditing of the hazard plan to review deviations and product dispositions and random samplings and checking to validate the whole plan. So the principle 6, it involves that there should be particular established procedures for verification to confirm that the HACCP plan which is made is effective. All such procedures, it includes internal auditing of the HACCP plan to review deviations and product dispositions and random samplings and checking to validate the whole plan. Random checking of truth sampling is done in order to validate that HACCP plan which is made is effective. The HACCP regulations require that all plants maintain certain documents, including its hazard analysis and written HACCP plan and records documenting the monitoring of critical control points, critical limits, verification activities, and handling of process deviation. So HACCP regulations, it requires, it instructs the plants to maintain the document properly for the hazard analysis and the written plan, HACCP plans, the records documenting monitoring of the CCPs, critical limits, all the verification activities which are performed, and the handling of process deviations. The HACCP system requires the preparation and maintenance of a written HACCP plan together with other documentation. So the HACCP system, it needs or it requires the preparation of a proper and HACCP plan, which should be maintained in proper documentation, and it should include all records generated during the monitoring of each CCP and notations of the corrective actions which were taken. Usually, the simplest record keeping system possible to ensure effectiveness is the most desirable one. The last principle is establish documentation concerning all procedures and records appropriate to these principles and their applications. So validation ensures that the industry or the plant complies with the required design or plan. That is, they are successful in ensuring the production of safe products. Plant will be required to validate their own HACCP plans. So the plants, they should have a particular documentation concerning all the procedures and records which are obtained during the HACCP implementation. The Food Safety and Inspection Service will not approve HACCP plan in advance, but they'll review them for confirmation with the final rule. Verification ensures that the HACCP plan is adequate, it is working as intended, and verification procedures may include activities such as review of HACCP plan, CCP records, critical limits, microbial sampling, analysis, etc. So both FSIS and industry will undertake microbial testing as one of the several verification activities, and requirements of FSIS is that the HACCP plan include verification tasks to be performed by the plant personnel, and verification tasks could also be performed by FSIS inspectors. So verification has several steps: scientific or technical validity of the hazard analysis, adequacy of the CCPs, etc. The system should be subject to periodic revalidation using independent audits. So HACCP offers continuous systematic approach to assure food safety, and what FDA and USDA, they are proposing umbrella regulations which will require HACCP plans of industries, and these industries will adapt HACCP approaches to food safety, whether or not it is required. Okay, so HACCP system verification activities include the following: review of the HACCP system and its record, observing of operations at CCPs, asking employees questions, especially those that monitor CCP, routine checks of monitoring procedures and equipment, review of critical limit deviations and non-conforming products handling and dispositions, the internal auditing of the HACCP system, external third-party auditing, microbial sampling of the product contact surfaces, official evaluation of the product. So the HACCP system verification activities. So what the things which should be there, or what are the things which include in the HACCP system verification activities? They are while verification of the HACCP system, they review the records, they review the observation of operations at CCPs, and they ask the employees uh, questions who are involved in monitoring the CCP. Uh, they do internal audits, external third party auditing is done, microbial samplings are done, and official evaluation of the products are performed during the verification of the HACCP system. That was all about HACCP. I hope you find the video informative. Thank you so much. Please do like, share, and subscribe to Food Tech Shiksha.